You sunk $60,000 into a remote cabin at the end of a dirt road. You stocked the basement with heirloom seeds, stacked cords of firewood, and bolted a solar array to the roof. In your mind, you built an impenetrable fortress against the collapse of society. You think you are isolated. You think you are safe. But from a tactical, threat modeling perspective, you haven't built a safe haven at all. You have built a fully stocked resupply depot for whoever has the numbers, the desperation, and the violence of action to take it from you. Let us talk about day zero. The grid goes down, the screens go black, and the modern world grinds to a catastrophic halt. You load up your truck, grab the family, and punch the accelerator toward that piece of paradise 80 miles outside the city limits. You unlock the front door, crack open a canned good, and watch the sunset from your porch. You feel like a genius. You beat the rush. But you are operating under a fatal miscalculation. You think distance equals security. You think 80 miles is a void that the desperate cannot cross. The Federal Emergency Management Agency calculates that it takes approximately 3 days for a major metropolitan area to strip its grocery store shelves bare. When the municipal water pumps die and the taps run dry, millions of panicked citizens will project outward in a 360-degree radius. Author James Wesley Rawls calls it the Golden Horde. Over 80% of the population lives in urban centres. When their immediate supplies vanish, they will not sit in their apartments and wait to die. They will walk outward into the rural zones. You might think a family on foot could never reach your cabin in the hills. But desperate humans, motivated by thirst, are a force of nature. Within 3 to 5 days of a localized collapse, the leading edge of this refugee wave will hit the 60-mile mark. By the time they reach the perimeter of your property, they will have exhausted whatever meager supplies they carried in their backpacks. They will be starving. They will be dehydrated. They will be running purely on primal instinct. They are entering your kill zone. People do not move randomly across the landscape. They follow lines of drift. In military doctrine, a line of drift is the path of least resistance across terrain. When the highways turn into parking lots of abandoned vehicles, the masses will transition to geographical funnels. They will walk along riverbanks, follow old railroad tracks, and hike through the straight, cleared paths of power line cuts. If your remote cabin sits in a picturesque valley with a creek running through it, you are sitting dead center on a prehistoric superhighway. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has studied this extensively. Displaced populations always follow infrastructure networks. When the exodus reaches your valley, they will simply walk up that riverbank until they see your dock. Hope is not a strategy here. Most people guess they have enough food and security, but the math says otherwise. Go to protocolsurvival.com right now, calculate your survival score, and enroll in our free Catastrophe Survival 101 course. Get the training before you need it, because guessing will get you killed. You are not preparing for yourself. You are preparing because guilt is a much heavier burden than a rifle. You do not stockpile water just to stay hydrated. You secure a water source so your child does not look up at you with cracked, bleeding lips, asking for a drink you do not have. That is the reality of the grid-down environment. It strips away your ego and leaves only your obligations. If you fail to understand the geography of desperation, you are failing the people who look to you for protection. By the end of the first week, the lockdown phase begins. The stragglers who survived the initial migration are now roaming the rural zones. This brings us to the foundational rule of survival property selection, which also happens to be your biggest vulnerability: the resource paradox. The exact resources you need to survive are the exact same resources that will draw threats directly to your door. Water is the heaviest burden in the world. Humanity will regress to its historical norm. They will cluster around natural surface water. The United States Geological Survey will tell you that surface water comprises a tiny fraction of the landscape, especially in the arid West. If your safe haven features a visible pond, a large creek, or a lake, you possess a massive tactical vulnerability. You cannot hide a lake. It is a glaring beacon on every topographical map. Water attracts wildlife, and wildlife attracts hunters. More importantly, it attracts displaced humans. If your defense strategy relies on keeping desperate people away from your water source, you are in trouble. People will not accept death by dehydration simply because you put up a private property sign. A piece of stamped metal nailed to a pine tree means absolutely nothing to a dying man. If they see water, they will come for it. And water is just the beginning. Long-term survival requires agriculture. But a cultivated garden, ordered rows of crops, and cleared land are unmistakable signs of human habitation. From a high vantage point, your farm screams that someone here has calories, tools, and the stability to grow food. Then comes the livestock. A single cow, or a flock of chickens, produces an acoustic and olfactory signature that cannot be contained. A rooster crowing carries for over a mile in a quiet valley. The smell of manure, the bleating of a goat, the scent of ripening crops on the wind. These are dinner bells for both two-legged and four-legged predators. In a starvation scenario, hunger heightens the senses. You think you are quietly homesteading, but to a starving group roaming the ridgeline, your property looks like a buffet. Let us talk about topography and aesthetics. Many preppers buy land based on how beautiful it is. A gorgeous log cabin nestled at the bottom of a wooded hollow, shielded from the harsh winter winds. It looks like paradise on a postcard, but tactically, a cabin in a valley is a death trap. You have surrendered the most critical element of defense, which is the high ground. US Army Field Manual 3-90 heavily emphasizes observation and fields of fire. If you are at the bottom, you have given the enemy total superiority. If a hostile group can sit on a ridge 400 yards away and observe your daily routines, your property is already lost. They will map your patrol patterns. They will note your security blind spots. They will watch you feed the chickens at exactly 7 in the morning. They will do all of this without you ever seeing them, safely concealed in the tree line above your roof. They will wait until you are vulnerable, perhaps asleep or distracted by heavy labour, and they will initiate an ambush from absolute dominance. The military concept of OCOC dictates your survival. Observation, avenues of approach, key terrain, obstacles, and cover. Most bug-out locations fail every single metric. Consider your avenues of approach. How many roads lead to your property? Most remote cabins have a single, long dirt driveway. You might think this is an advantage because you only have one road to watch. But a single avenue of approach means you can be trapped with zero effort. It is a fatal funnel. Your mobility is your lifeline. Imagine a group fells a massive oak tree across your driveway in the middle of the night. You wake up, realize the perimeter is breached, and load your family into your 4x4 rig to escape. You hit the gas, fly down the driveway, and slam the brakes when you see the roadblock. You cannot go forward. You cannot turn around in the thick brush. You are effectively pinned in a kill zone. You thought you bought an isolated sanctuary, but what you actually bought was a dead end. The sheer volume of human waste generated by a family of 4 in a single month is staggering. In a modern home, you flush it away and forget it exists. In a grid-down lockdown, waste disposal becomes a deadly tactical issue. If you dig latrines too close to your pristine well, you contaminate your own groundwater. Cholera and typhus are historically the greatest killers in any siege scenario. If you dig them too far away, you have to leave your defensive perimeter just to use the bathroom, exposing yourself to sniper fire. The baseline of the world will change drastically during a collapse. The background noise of civilization will vanish. The world will become incredibly dark, incredibly quiet, and very cold. If you are surviving comfortably, you will be producing signatures that stand out violently against this new baseline. The Department of Defense hammers light discipline into troops for a reason. In a world without streetlights or ambient city glow, the human eye adapts to the dark. A single flashlight beam can be seen for miles. If you are the only house in a 20-mile radius with a working solar array, and you turn on your living room lights at night, you are committing tactical suicide. Light escaping through a window is a lighthouse for the desperate. It tells everyone in the valley that you have power, normalcy, and resources. Blackout curtains are not an accessory. They are a mandatory life support system. Every photon of light that escapes your structure at night is an invitation to violence. You must operate in the dark. Acoustic signatures are just as deadly. You bought a high-end, quiet inverter generator. You think it barely makes a sound. But in a post-collapse rural environment, the hum of an engine carries for miles across open terrain. The sound of a chainsaw biting into timber is an advertisement that someone has fuel, tools, and the physical calories to do hard labour. The crack of a hunting rifle rolling down the hills tells every starving survivor exactly where the meat is. Silence is your best camouflage. Then we have thermal and olfactory signatures. Winter hits and you fire up the wood stove to keep your children from freezing. It is vital for survival, but it produces heat and smoke. Thermal imaging technology is no longer restricted to elite military units. Cheap thermal drones and handheld scopes are widely owned by civilians, hunters, and potential marauders. Your warm, poorly insulated cabin will glow like a supernova on a thermal scope. You will stand out against the frozen landscape. Worse than the heat is the smell. The scent of wood smoke travels on the wind. If you manage to bag a deer and start cooking meat over a fire, the fat dripping into the coals will send an olfactory signal for miles. Desperate, starving people experience a heightened sense of smell. The scent of cooking meat is an irresistible lure. They will walk through the dark, follow the scent of the smoke, and find your chimney. Every log you burn is a smoke signal pinpointing your exact coordinates. Day 15. The emergence phase. Let us address the primary counter-argument. You might think the National Guard will step in. You might think the local sheriff is going to maintain order and protect your property lines. This is a fatal assumption. In a true grid-down scenario or severe economic collapse, law enforcement will be completely overwhelmed containing the fires in the urban centres. They are not sending a convoy 80 miles into the sticks to check on your cabin. You are entirely on your own. When the grid goes dark, the cloud goes with it. You cannot rely on internet searches, digital maps, or online forums when the cell towers die. You need a command center that works offline. I built Protocol Survival to be exactly that system. Secure your inventory, track your expiration dates, and access your offline training modules right now while you still have a signal. Download the app, because when the screen goes black, the information you have saved locally is the only intelligence you have left. Many preppers confuse concealment with cover. This is a lethal misunderstanding. Concealment hides you from observation. A thick bush, a wooden fence, or the siding of a standard cabin provides concealment. Cover, on the other hand, stops incoming fire. A berm of earth, sandbags, or thick stone walls provide cover. Most rural safe havens are constructed of wood framing, drywall, and glass. They offer absolute zero ballistic protection. Your living room is not a bunker. It is a fragile wooden box. A standard hunting rifle, like a .308 or a .30-06, will punch clean through both sides of a modern wood-framed house without losing much velocity. If an armed group decides they want your supplies, They do not need to kick in your front door like a movie SWAT team. They can simply stand behind the safety of the tree line and fire indiscriminately into your home until you surrender or perish. Unless you have fortified your interior walls with gravel, your home is just a wooden tent. One of the greatest vulnerabilities of your safe haven has nothing to do with tactics or physical geography. It has to do with administration. You cannot buy a piece of land in the United States completely anonymously. When you purchase a property, dig a deep water well, install a septic tank, or build a heavy structure, a permanent paper trail is created. The county assessor office holds public records of exactly who owns what land, how many acres it is, and what improvements have been made. Well drilling permits detail the exact depth and gallons per minute of your off-grid water source. In the lead up to a slow burn collapse, this information is easily scraped and accessible. If local gangs, organised crime syndicates, or predatory groups decide to map out resource-rich properties before the lights go out, your well-stocked haven is already sitting in a database. They know you have water. They know you have solar power. You built a fortress, but you gave the blueprints to the government. Moving into the long haul, day 31 and beyond. Let us talk about your digital footprint and local gossip. If you live in a city and bought a rural property to escape to, you are an outsider. To build that safe haven, you likely hired local contractors to pour the concrete, wire the solar panels, or dig the bunker. You bought massive quantities of PVC pipe and lumber at the local hardware store. You might think you practiced good operational security, but the rural community knows everything. Rural communities are tight-knit networks of information. The locals know exactly who bought the old farm at the end of the road. They know you installed a 10,000-watt solar system and an underground root cellar. When a crisis hits and the local supply chains dry up, their own families will begin to starve. You will not be viewed as a friendly neighbour who planned ahead. You will be viewed as an outsider, hoarding life-saving resources while the locals suffer. Desperation changes people. This is where the psychology of survival gets incredibly dark. You assume rural people are inherently virtuous and will respect your property rights. That is a dangerous fairy tale. Starvation strips away morality. If a local father of 3 knows you have a basement full of freeze-dried food, and he is watching his children fade away from malnutrition, he will come for your food. He will not feel bad about it. He will feel morally justified. And he will likely have the backing of the local community. The social dynamics of a collapse scenario are brutal. You cannot just move to a rural county and expect to be part of the Mutual Defence Force if you only visit 2 weeks a year. According to the Rand Corporation, social cohesion is the primary factor in surviving a disaster. When the collapse occurs, locals will quickly form roadblocks and mutual assistance groups. When you arrive from the city fleeing the chaos, they will not see you as a fellow survivalist. They will see you as a refugee. Historical examples of collapsed societies, from the fall of the Soviet Union to modern failed states, prove that power vacuums are never empty for long. They are quickly filled by organised violence. Gangs, former military units, and local warlords will emerge. These organised groups will not waste their time trying to scavenge crumbs in an empty, burned-out city. They will send scouts outward, heavily armed, looking for intact, resourced locations. A highly fortified safe haven signals immense value. A determined, heavily armed group will employ siege tactics. They will use fire, suppression, and overwhelming force. Unless you have a squad-sized element of 9 to 13 highly trained individuals standing watch in shifts 24 hours a day, a single family cannot defend a fixed position against an organised threat. You have to sleep. You have to work. The moment your eyes close, the perimeter is breached. The lone wolf survival fantasy is a myth. In reality, the lone wolf dies alone. Let us talk about the trap of high-tech infrastructure. Many modern safe havens are designed with incredible technology. EMP-shielded solar arrays, atmospheric water generators, automated security perimeters with night vision cameras. But high-tech solutions require high-tech maintenance. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency emphasizes the fragility of supply chains. When the grid fails, the supply chain for spare parts vanishes instantly. The more complex your survival system is, the worse it gets. If your water supply relies entirely on a 500-foot deep well with a heavy-duty submersible pump, what happens when that pump motor burns out in year 2 of a grid-down scenario? You cannot call a technician. You cannot order a replacement coil online. If your security cameras rely on routers that fail, or your solar inverter blows a capacitor, your high-tech safe haven is suddenly crippled. Once the critical infrastructure of your property fails, it ceases to be a haven. It becomes a tomb. Let us look at the reality of medical emergencies in the long haul. Your isolated safe haven might protect you from the initial horde, but it isolates you from critical care. If you are chopping wood and an axe slips, shattering your tibia, what is the protocol? In the city, it is a 911 call and a 20-minute ambulance ride. Off the grid, in a post-collapse lockdown, an open fracture is a death sentence. Infection will set in rapidly. Without a medical network, your fortress becomes a hospice. This is why the lone wolf dies. You cannot pull guard duty, chop cords of wood, haul heavy buckets of water, and nurse a severe infection simultaneously. The human body breaks down under the crushing logistical weight of off-grid survival. If you are isolated, a simple case of dysentery from a fouled water source will completely wipe out your family. A tactical community provides redundancy. If one man goes down, the watch is still manned. Isolation removes redundancy, and zero redundancy means death. Understanding why your safe haven is a target is the first step in mitigating the risks. You cannot eliminate every threat, but you can alter your strategy to make your property a hardened, highly unappealing target. The first major shift is moving from isolation to integration. Do not buy an isolated piece of land where you are a stranger. Relocate permanently to a resilient agricultural community before the crisis occurs. A dozen trusted neighbours is the ultimate force multiplier for your family. Building a safe haven inside an existing, robust community provides the numbers needed for true security. You can establish layered defense, shared night watches, and medical networks. But if you must build an isolated bug-out location, you must prioritize terrain over aesthetics. Avoid the lines of drift at all costs. Ensure your property is miles away from major highways, railroad tracks, and navigable rivers. Force any approaching threat to cross incredibly difficult terrain just to see your perimeter. Seek the high ground. Build your structures near the military crest of a hill. This is the topographical line just below the absolute summit. It provides you with sweeping, dominant views of your avenues of approach, while preventing your silhouette from being outlined against the sky. Limit your avenues of approach. Choose land surrounded by dense swamps, sheer rock faces, or impassable bramble. Use the terrain as an obstacle belt that naturally funnels anyone approaching into a single choke point. Camouflage and signature reduction must be your obsession. Your safe haven should look like absolute garbage from the outside. It should look abandoned, stripped, and devoid of value. Do not clear-cut your land to make a pretty lawn. Leave a thick, chaotic perimeter of native trees and dense brush to block the line of sight from nearby access roads. Paint your structures in matte, earth-tone colours that blend into the seasonal foliage. If it looks ruined, the roaming patrols will walk past it. You must manage your thermal and acoustic output. If you must use a wood stove, use only dry hardwoods that burn incredibly hot and produce very little smoke. Route your chimney exhaust through a ground loop cooling system. By pushing the smoke through buried pipes before it vents out a distant stump, you dissipate the heat and scrub the particulate, destroying the thermal signature before it ever hits the cold air. Bury your generator inside a sound-baffled bunker. Remain utterly invisible to the senses. Build true cover into your architecture. Do not rely on wood. Incorporate ballistic protection into the actual bones of your house. Fill the interior wall cavities with crushed gravel or sand. Use thick stone, brick, or cinder blocks filled with rebar and concrete. Build reinforced earthbag walls around your garden and living structures to absorb high-velocity rifle rounds. Create concealed fighting positions like foxholes or reinforced trenches that provide overlapping fields of fire covering your driveway. You must decentralize your resources. Do not keep all your food, medical supplies, and ammunition inside the main cabin. This is a critical point of failure. If you are overrun by a massive force, or if your cabin catches fire from a lightning strike or a marauder's torch, you lose absolutely everything in one horrific night. You must practice caching as a standard operating procedure, your SOP. Pack freeze-dried food, water filters, trauma gear, and spare ammunition into heavy-duty PVC tubes. Mark these caches only with encrypted GPS coordinates or pace count azimuths that only your family knows. If you are forced to abandon your own safe haven, you simply transition to a guerrilla posture. You fall back into the woods, dig up your caches, and you still have the caloric and kinetic resources to survive, evade, and rebuild. Your house is just a structure. Your supplies are your lifeblood. Never put all your critical life support systems inside a single wooden box that can be burned. The National Interagency Fire Center warns about the wildland-urban interface. Isolated cabins are highly susceptible to wildfires. In a collapse, there are no fire departments to drop retardant on a blaze. A single lightning strike, or a fire set deliberately by an organized threat to flush you out of your bunker, will consume your property in minutes. Defensible space is not just about clearing brush for aesthetics. It is about creating a fire break that stops a wall of flame from turning you to ash. This requires a clinical, unromantic analysis of reality. You have to stop visualizing survival as a fun weekend camping trip where you hunt deer and chop firewood in a flannel shirt. Survival in a grid-down environment is a brutal, exhausting, terrifying marathon of calorie management, waste disposal, and constant paranoia. Every time you snap a twig under your boot, you will freeze, wondering if a scouting party heard it. Every time your child coughs, you will pray that the sound did not carry. You have to think like an insurgent, and you have to think like a predator. Walk your own property line. Look at your house from a mile away through a scope. Ask yourself, if I was freezing, starving, and desperate to keep my kids alive, how would I breach this perimeter? Where are the blind spots? What is the easiest avenue of approach? If you can identify the weaknesses in your own defense, I guarantee a veteran combat tracker or a motivated gang leader will spot them. Harden the target now. By understanding exactly why your safe haven is a target, you can redesign your entire approach. You shift away from the illusion of a secluded fortress. You embrace the reality of camouflage, terrain selection, tactical geometry, and most importantly, community integration. You stop buying high-tech gadgets that will fail, and you start investing in social capital, mutual defense, and unglamorous logistics. True preparedness is not a location on a map. It is a dynamic strategy built on human cooperation. Let me remind you why we do this. We don't prep to hide in a hole while the world burns. We prep so that when the darkness comes, we can stand in the gap between the chaos and the people we love. You are building a shield. You are taking on the burden of foresight so your family does not have to bear the agony of starvation. It is a heavy burden, downrange and here at home. But it is the only mission that matters. Evaluate your vulnerabilities. Stop advertising your readiness to the world. The concept of an invincible bug-out location is a myth sold by survival entertainment and marketers pushing expensive gear. When you strip away the romanticism, you are left with geography, human desperation, and the unforgiving math of a shattered supply chain. Your retreat, with its pristine water and stored food, is not a refuge from the storm. By virtue of human nature, it is the absolute centre of it. Do not let your safe haven become the very thing that gets you killed. Adapt your posture. The grid is fragile. The supply chains are illusions. The modern world is just a thin veneer of civility stretched over a primal core. When that veneer rips, you will not rise to the occasion. You will default to your level of training. You will default to the tactical soundness of the ground you chose to stand on. If you chose a valley, you will die in a valley. If you chose an illuminated glass house, you will perish in it. Choose the high ground. Choose silence. Choose the shadows. And remember this when you are looking out over your land, wondering if you have done enough to protect your people. The infrastructure of society, the power lines, the water pipes, the cell towers, they provide comfort, yes, but that is not their true purpose. The grid isn't what keeps the lights on, it's what keeps the monsters out.